Welcome back to the Morning Kickoff Show. I'm your host, Matt Witt. We are back to talk Minnesota Vikings football. Can the Minnesota Vikings make a trade for Dolphins tight end Mike Gesicki? According to sources, Gesicki is expected to be traded away from the Dolphins by the NFL trade deadline. With the Vikings heading into bye week 7 and the trade deadline just 10 days away, Gesicki could be a solution for this Minnesota Vikings offense to retain possession of the NFC North. As of right now, the Minnesota Vikings have had a lot of woes with the tight end position. Irv Smith Jr. has suffered with some drop passes. We've suffered with injuries with Ben Ellefson. Many claim Gesicki would be a perfect fit for this Minnesota Vikings offense, as the offense has struggled on third down and has struggled in the red zone. Well, how has Gesicki been used with the Miami Dolphins offense? He's been that passing down receiving tight end that the Vikings just simply do not have. We thought it was going to be with Irv Smith Jr., and so far this season it has not been the case. We thought that Johnny Munt was going to be getting a lot more receptions, and all respect to Johnny Munt, he's done a great job in the blocking game. He is just simply not the guy you go down to on third down. When Justin Jefferson is double teamed, Adam Thielen is covered. You have KJ Osborne, you have some other players into the mix, but why not add another playmaker on this Minnesota Vikings offense? And that's when we turn to Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, 2018 draft pick from the Miami Dolphins, 42nd overall draft pick from Penn State. Disgusting. We're going to play Penn State this weekend, my Minnesota Gophers. Sorry, Penn State fans. They're very good. Okay. Onto this back onto Mike Gesicki here. 31 career starts in Miami, 16 touchdowns, and is getting consistently over 500 yards as a backup tight end. Now, he's a backup tight end in Miami, but realistically, he's the tight end you want to throw the ball to. He's not going to be... It's like if he goes into the Minnesota Vikings. If the Vikings do acquire Mike Gesicki via trade, he will likely not be our starting tight end. But he will likely be the tight end who gets the most targets on this Minnesota Vikings offense, because that's exactly who he was with Miami Dolphins, and that's exactly what works with him. I would expect Johnny Munt to continue to be our blocking tight end, and he's done a great job. All respect to Johnny Munt. I believe Johnny Munt is a very underappreciated player in this Minnesota Vikings offense. Obviously, very unathletic guy, not the guy you want to go to. That's why you add a player you want to go to. Is it Irv Smith Jr.? You can still make the argument. I believe you can. You can't dismiss the fact that he struggled. But with that being said, I mean, it's the more playmakers you have, the better. What makes a Super Bowl team? In my opinion, a Super Bowl team is both of these two things. They can win in many different ways, and they can win in any environment. Are you convinced that the Minnesota Vikings can win in many different ways? We saw it this last game where the defense did win us the game, and we also saw that they could win in many different environments this season. I mean, they won in Miami, which is very different from most environments that they play in. They got destroyed against the Philadelphia Eagles. Can they win in many different ways and win in any environment? The Vikings didn't have a great week last week. Yes, they won. They did win in a different way. That's perfect. But are we convinced that they can do both of those two things week in and week out? Mike Gesicki could add that playmaker for the Minnesota Vikings that they've really been lacking on third down and into the red zone. But at what cost? See, this is the thing here. What will it cost the Minnesota Vikings? Mike Gesicki has a very high, steep contract right now. Mike Gesicki has about $11 million being paid, and he's essentially a backup tight end. He's started one game for them so far this season. Vikings have $850,000 in cap room, and this would put them negative $10 million or $10 million over the cap. So this would be cap hell for the Minnesota Vikings. Meaning, if the Vikings do acquire Mike Gesicki, he'll likely only be here for this season. It's very unlikely that he would return for the Minnesota Vikings, and even more unlikely that the Vikings trade for Mike Gesicki and give him a contract extension right off the bat. There are a lot of things the Minnesota Vikings have to focus on this offseason, with the biggest one being Justin Jefferson. You have to give Jefferson a top wide receiver contract in the NFL because he's deserving of that. And it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to do that for Justin Jefferson and also give Mike Gesicki a huge contract, because you're going to have to pick between Gesicki, Johnny Munt, Irv Smith Jr. All of these guys would be going into free agency. Who can you go with going forward? Is it going to be Gesicki or someone else? In my opinion, it should be someone else, because if we do make a trade for Mike Gesicki, we will be in terrible cap situation. But that's not the reason why you're trading for Mike Gesicki. You're trading for Gesicki for his 2022-2023 upside. That's why I believe the Minnesota Vikings should acquire Mike Gesicki for the right price, because he could be that playmaker that turns this disgusting 38.7 third down conversion percentage into above 50. He could be, because that's exactly the kind of guy he is. Look at how Kirk Cousins has played so far this season. Now, statistically, he hasn't had a great season, but every Vikings fan that's been watching Kirk Cousins is mostly satisfied with the way he's been playing this season. His stats might have been way better last season, but it does look like he's better this season under Kevin O'Connell's offense. And this is how the Minnesota Vikings, why I believe Gesicki could fit with the Minnesota Vikings is because he'd be another read for Kirk Cousins. Looking at Kirk Cousins dropping back to pass, Justin Jefferson double teamed. First read on just about every pass. Perfect. He should be. Rightfully so, right? Now you go to Adam Thielen. He's been covered a lot too many times this season. And a lot of the times, Kirk Cousins doesn't have the time to wait for Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne to get open down for a 15-plus yard pass. That's where Gesicki is elite. In those 8-yard gains, in those red zone touchdown threats for the Minnesota Vikings. With his massive wingspan, could lead this Minnesota Vikings team in the most receiving touchdowns this season, because that's been what the Vikings have struggled with. Justin Jefferson, been elite this season. Still not the guy we've been going to very much into the red zone. Adam Thielen was the last few seasons, hasn't been so far this season. Who is that Minnesota Vikings red zone X factor? Could it be Gesicki? And this is what we're looking for here. We're looking for that 2022, 2023 upside. But at what cost? I mentioned the salary cap. It would put us in salary cap hell. That's okay. We would likely only have him for this 2022-2023 season. Likely not return with the team because of the salary cap situation. Yes, there is a solution to every salary cap situation you put yourself in, but it's very unlikely that they're going to have to restructure contracts for Mike Gesicki. Let's be honest. But at what cost? In my opinion, the Minnesota Vikings and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah should not give anything more than a day 3 draft pick. 4th round draft pick or later for Mike Gesicki. Because look at what the Dolphins are doing here right now. The Dolphins want to trade away Mike Gesicki. They know he's not going to return with the team. They know that this is going to be the last season they have with Gesicki. 5 years were great, but he's not going to return with the team. So now they're shopping him. They're going to give whatever they can to get something for Mike Gesicki, because right now he hasn't been producing for them so far this season. He's been their backup tight end, hasn't been given very many targets. Very weird to see that the Dolphins are actually trading Gesicki, in my opinion. I believe that any team that's competing for a Super Bowl shouldn't try to trade away one of their playmakers. But, you know, there's things that I'm sure the coaches that Mike McDaniel knows that we don't know. So I'm sure there's something out there that is a real reason why they want to trade him away. But all I know is that they are trading him away, meaning the Minnesota Vikings, they are wanting to trade him away, meaning the Minnesota Vikings can get him at a very cheap cost. Nothing more than a day 3 draft pick. I don't want to see a 3rd round draft pick in there. I don't want to see a 2nd. And obviously, we don't want anyone wants to see a 1st. So nothing less than a 4th round draft pick or 5th round or 6th round. Give something small for Mike Gesicki, because you know you're really only going to have him for this 2022-2023 playoff push. I love teams that go all in. I love when a team does everything they can, get 1-year contracts just to try to load up with how many playmakers they can. Look at last year with the Rams. Bobby Wagner, 1-year contract. They got Odell Beckham Jr. on a 1-year contract. Andrew Whitworth, I believe, was on a 1-year contract. There's a lot of players that led them to their Super Bowl championship. And that's exactly what the Minnesota Vikings should be doing here. Not to mention the fact that they recently traded for Jalen Ramsey and Matthew Stafford, who were biggest playmakers or biggest pieces of that 2022 Rams defense and offense. Let me know what y'all think. Should the Minnesota Vikings make a push for Mike Gesicki?